Looking at how Iran and Israel flexed their military muscles in recent months, our minds couldn't help but wonder who would come out on top if the US and America went toe-to-toe with one another. After all, things could escalate with the pesky embargo war that went on a few months back. For quite some time now, the convention has said that the US has been considered to be the country with the most powerful military force in the world. Looking at how China has worked so hard to catch up economically and technologically, that may be set to change in the coming years. With that in mind, let's see who would win a war between the US and the Republic of China. Military force. We start out by giving China something of an advantage. You see, it should be fair enough to say that China would have the larger manpower of the two countries. After all, the PLA, that is the People's Liberation Army of China, currently has the largest military force in terms of active personnel in the world, with numbers coming up to about 2 million loyal Chinese military men ready to put their lives on the line for their country. That is in contrast to the 1.3 million or so Americans that have pledged their allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. This should come as no surprise, really, because the Chinese population is almost 5 times that of the US, with China being the home of about 1.4 billion citizens compared to the 340 million people that call themselves Americans. Looking at the numbers, though, some could say that the US is more militarized. What that fails to take into account is that over the last few decades, China has taken steps to reduce their military force from about 4 million servicemen at the turn of the century to the current 2 million, with plans to shed these numbers some more. Apparently, this was done in a bid to invest more in technology and military weapons. What we've now seen is an improvement in combat readiness and mechanized forces in a way that has seen them catch up with some of the best military forces in the world. With that in mind, although the US may still have an edge, the Chinese will have the ability to carry out prolonged conflict thanks to the sheer numbers that they have at their disposal. Military budget. Another thing that many people would know about the US is that they have invested a lot of money in their military forces. Right now, the military budget for the US Army for 2025 is believed to be something around a staggering $850 billion. This is almost unbelievable, as this figure represents the fact that the US has reduced the percentage of the money dedicated to its military from its national budget in recent times. What may be even more daunting about this is that the US is still the biggest investor in its military and national defense programs in the world. As such, you can imagine that China may feel a bit dwarfed because they were believed to have invested anything between $266 billion to $700 billion as of 2025. This makes up about 1.7% of their national budget, which is just about half of the 3.4% that the US has allocated to their military forces in the same year. However, this may not last for long, as since the year 2000, the amount of money invested in the military forces have grown more than tenfold. This tells us that China is experiencing an explosive economic development, and that the PLA has decided that it is best for them to make that transition towards modernization, especially as they have potential opponents such as the US to think about in the future. That said, it seems as though the industrial force of China could help them even against the odds when it comes to military warfare. With their ability to mass produce their weapons, thanks to their enormous industrial and manufacturing capacity, there is no telling what could happen. Sure, the US has more advanced weapons, but their limited production capabilities and the huge cost of production, when compared to that of China, could be a factor to really worry about. Navy. With that in mind, we turn to the naval forces of both countries. When you think about it, both the US Navy and the People's Liberation Army Navy are both two of the most powerful Navy forces on the planet. However, when we really look into it, you'd find that they are able to do so through very different means. One of the most important differences between both forces is the size of their fleet. This is actually interesting because it is believed that both countries actually have about 350 warships. However, the difference seems to be in the way that these warships are used by both nations. For starters, the size and quality of those ships really come into play when we talk about their aircraft carriers. Sure, China may have roughly the same amount of ships as the US, but the quality is just different. Just look at the 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that the US can bring to the table. In comparison to the 2 that China has, the gulf in quality and quantity really starts to show. Another issue that comes to play here when we talk about these carriers is that unfortunately the Chinese carriers are believed to be inferior to American ones. Even the newly designed Chinese aircraft carriers such as the Fujin or the Type 003 still use fossil fuels to get around. This makes it problematic when it comes to long journeys, or if it needs to spend a long amount of time away from the port, because it would need to be refueled and restocked way more frequently than the USS Gerald R. Ford, the U.S. Navy's most advanced aircraft carrier. With that in mind, such a carrier and the others found in the U.S. naval fleet are perfect carriers that are capable of deploying a much more superior air fleet, such as the F-35C stealth fighter or the EA-18G Growler for electric warfare. Add the fact that the U.S. carriers come with more robust launching systems, automation, and powerful defense weapons. It looks like the seas may actually belong to the Americans if they actually decide to go after China in a battle of the seas. In fact, we are forced to state that the only way that China could make the difference in the battle of the seas would be to make the most of their naval expansion plan. And that would mean that its massive manufacturing potential must play its part to the T. This is really important because right now they have about 350 warships. But by the end of the year, it is estimated that this could increase to about 400 and then some by the end of the decade. However, some may say this may not be enough because a good number of those ships are corvettes, the small class of warships, something that the U.S. Navy phased out of their fleet decades ago. Perhaps even worse, it is probably designed for coastal warfare. With that in mind, we struggle to see how China would do well if they were to take on the U.S. in the open seas. Air Force. Suffice it to say, the U.S. has about 13,000 aircrafts in its fleet. This number tells us that the U.S. has one of the largest fleets of aircrafts in the world. Compare that to the 3,000 or so aircrafts that China has at their disposal, and you can see that one country looks as though it is set to dominate the other in the air. It gets even worse when we realize that the U.S. doesn't just dominate in quantity, it also dominates in quality. Just take a look at their bomber aircrafts. The U.S. Air Force can boast of F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II. These aircrafts are fifth-generation aircrafts that were built with stealth, maneuverability, advanced avionics, and multi-role capabilities in mind, and boy, did they deliver. With such jets in their fleet, we can see how the U.S. would be able to snatch the wind out of the Chinese aircraft with ease. Sure, China can turn up to play with their own fifth-generation fighter, the Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon, and sure, it has undergone several upgrades to its avionics, engine, and stealth figures, but can it really make the difference when it comes to the battle for supremacy? Right now, what we do know is that despite all these upgrades, the J-20 doesn't seem to be such a mighty dragon when it goes against other fighter-generation aircrafts. It just seems to have too many engine problems. Add the poor armament and the outdated stealth design to boot, and you can actually see why it just doesn't make the cut when compared to the American bombers. Add the fact that the J-20 isn't battle-tested, and you can see how the air is too problematic for China as well. The only thing we can say is that China may be able to rely on its amazing production capabilities to make the difference. For example, it is believed that by 2035, China would have about 1,000 J-20s in their fleet. Add the production of different variations such as the J-16 and the J-10, and they may actually have a shot. Then there is the fact that China is outproducing the U.S. when it comes to drones. With the shift from manned aircrafts to these automated machines coming into play in modern warfare, this could actually be a difference maker if these two great nations go against one another. Then again, that is, if they can actually beat the U.S. stealth bombers. Right now, there are too many factors coming into play, but right now the U.S. may actually come out on top in this battle of the most powerful countries in the world. Thanks to its advanced weapons and its heavy investments in them, China may still have a way to go when it comes to the battle of the nations. With any luck, China may be able to make its mass production capabilities make the difference for them.